Then you have your construction cost. We're probably 30% more compact of a schedule, and therefore, the EPC, I don't want to speak for them. They know their construction costs a lot better, but that's definitely a significant reduction in construction costs.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is we talked earlier about how small pixel sizes are really important. And you see a lot of trackers trying to achieve small pixels. That's why I think 2P came around, was to get shorter cables to handle terrain. With our product, you're going to see a 70% reduction or better in your civil costs to accommodate a tracker.
The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today, we continue our series on single-axis trackers, and we have a very unusual technology today. My guest is a company called Sunfolding. Welcome to the show, Wes Fuller, VP of Sales and Strategic Partnerships for Sunfolding.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me on. Really excited to be on the podcast and to share more about trackers.
What I wanted to say is that there are parallels between the tracker industry and the automotive industry that we're going to see a continuation of here with your technology. But, we saw Sunfolding at SPI in 2018, me and several of our project managers, and our heads were kind of spinning, to be honest. It's a very different drive system. I call it a bellows. The actuator is driven by compressed air. And we're going to show some slides here in a little bit to give people a taste. Of course, they can check it out at sunfolding.com. But give our listeners some background on yourself, Wes. How did you get into the solar industry and come to Sunfolding?
Yeah, thanks. So I got into the space because when I was coming out of college, I thought it'd be really cool to be Tony Stark and get into weapons. And I found out it's really hard to sleep at night knowing you're making products that were destroying the world as opposed to helping the world. So then I got a really great opportunity to go to a company called AMP, which is a spinoff out of the Advanced Energy family. And then through a couple of great successes, I've been lucky enough to find my way with the new Sunfolding family. And it's an exciting solution that's shaking up the market, and I couldn't be happier to be here.
Excellent. So why don't we give our listeners a quick overview of the history of the company? How did it get started? What was the ideation? And then a little bit of where you are in your evolution.
Yeah. So we're very proud to be a woman-founded company. Our founder, Leila Madrone, is an absolute brilliant person who came from MIT with a background in robotics. She is the one who kind of came up with the idea of using air as an actuation device, and then partnered that with several members of our team who came from First Solar to create a product that basically, when you step back and said, if I could design a tracker ground up with a material that would significantly reduce my dependence on steel, what would that be? So that was kind of the birthing place of the Sunfolding Tracker. We're a very elder 8-year-old startup because we spent a lot of time in the beginning methodically deploying our product to ensure it worked. It's very different. You go out to the market, you see square torque tube, round torque tube, square torque tube, round torque tube, 1P, 2P, that's really it. So we were shaking it up and we needed it to work. So here we are now, we're deploying large utility scale projects all over the country, and our time has arrived and we have great proof points on the ground now.
Very cool. Yeah, it's great to see how trackers have really taken the industry by storm. And it's the exception now where you have fixed tilt ground mount solar. The vast majority of projects are using trackers. Of course, there are uh, some specific applications like brownfields that are going to be dominated by fixed tilt. But so what what made Layla think about using compressed air though for driving the tracking driving the tracker?
Yeah, so you alluded to in the beginning how we're borrowing a lot from other industries, automotive, heavy industry. Polymer-based materials are used a lot in extremely corrosive, extremely harsh environments, from maritime to natural gas to automotive to heavy machine lifting. So if we're using gears to move panels east and west, why can't we use polymers to make panels move east and west? and then reduce our dependence on that steel, reduce our dependence on surviving all that friction, and have a material that at the end of the day is going to last longer than all that steel in those gears and motors. So I think that was a big driving force for creating the product.
And let's talk more about the connection to the automobile industry. You mentioned
Mhm.
polymers. What exactly are we talking about there?
Yeah. So if anybody's seen our product, we basically are an aluminum structure that has polymers on the east side and west side that through different pressures will make the tracker track east or west. There's a lot more secret sauce in there that makes it extremely accurate, but at a high level, that's it. The polymer is something we developed in partnership with DuPont, which creates a sort of rubber-like material. You see these polymers in the docking boot for a pipe of a ship that's docked at a moor. You see them in the CVJ boot of your car, and you see it in the SpaceX shuttle when it's getting lined up for launching those astronauts into space. They have these large polymer bladders that lift the structure up. And you can see here in this photo on the right where it says AirDrive X, that's our marketing name for it, the dark bladders there. So the polymers are extremely robust material that have been used in heavy industry for decades.
And we're going to give a taste of the system overview here in a second as well. But that bladder then is uh, one side is filling differentially, right? So is that the case though, that the bladder is kind of divided into two, and then you're pumping air into one side or the other to make it move the table to follow the sun?
Correct. So you have a set amount of air on the east side and a set amount of air on the west side of the bladders inside the actuator. And that differential is what's going to make the tracker either point east or point west. And then as you change that differential, you rotate through those angles.
Yeah, very cool. And so the idea is that instead of using electric motors, you're using compressed air. Now, something is driving that compressor.
Mhm.
So there are still moving parts. There's still metal. It's not like you can completely get rid of um, some of the components. And we're going to show a slide with some other tracker technologies also, just for so people can compare that. But so what else is unique about your approach to tracking?
Yeah, and we talked about this before. One of the things we're thinking about is how we saw all these articles come out describing last week and the week before how we hit this incredible milestone in the US where we're going to have 70% of all plants installed this year be fossil free. What we kind of still are lacking and thinking that's not enough is in the fact that solar is only 2.7% of the energy produced compared to fossils. So we hit this incredible milestone we should be super proud about, but it's not enough. And we need to violently ramp up our deployment of solar. And as you know, not all sites are looking like giant, gorgeous fields in the Midwest where they aren't land constrained. I think even Jigger on your last podcast pointed that out. We're starting to get into some really tightly constrained plots of land, some really tumultuous terrain. And we need a product that you can neutralize your costs so that you have that great cost on that rectangle when you go into those tough terrain sites, when you have those rolling hills or undulations or ravines or sites that don't look like Iowa or Colorado, they look more like West Virginia or Kentucky. So we designed a product that if you saw that actuator's on every pile, that means we only need 2 piles out of a physical table. That means we have the shortest tracker table in industry so that we can handle a wide diversity of terrain without impacting your cost.
Yeah. And that it definitely is a thing that, flat terrain is becoming scarcer and scarcer on the coasts. That's not the case here in the Midwest. So we have just loads and loads of very flat ground here in the
Mhm.
Midwest. Of course, some of it rolls a little bit, but it is seldom that you really have terrain challenges here in the Midwest. We have more flooding challenges, a lot of lowland. And I don't know if that's something you think about or a consideration. I mean, one of the responses to flooding is, well, we'll just put the array up taller, and to some extent that works depending on the technology.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share your one of your web pages here. This is the home page for the T29 Sunfolding T29 single axis tracker, and this graphic shows the main components. Are there multiple compressors, or yeah, let's talk about, for a megawatt block, walk us
Mhm.
through the technology involved in that.
Sure. And no offense to the megawatt size, we're going to go up to 7 because that's our largest block size, where you'll see the most efficient use of components, or the most impressive use of components. And also to touch on one fun thing, T29, the 29 is the molecular weight of air, 2.9.
Oh,
So
cool.
that's the fun naming with that product name. So what you're looking at on the screen is obviously a field of panels, and then all our components clustered together. You want to see it like this in field. In the middle, you have our actuator. On the left, you have our tracker controller, which is a static product. And on the right, you have our supply air system, or SAS, in that sort of inverter looking shed with your medio control on top. In a typical block of 7 megawatts, you will see one SAS, or one supply air system, on the right. And then you'll see a distribution of the tracker controllers, which are telling the tables to track east or west, depending on the position of the sun. And then the actuators.
The last thing you said was what?
The actuators. So
Okay.
the device on the pile.
Yeah. And so one compressor for
7
how many?
megawatts.
7 megawatts.
Yeah. If you go down, you'll still have one, but smaller in power.
Yeah. So there are some efficiencies as you scale up.
Well, it just shows you how efficient the system is in large blocks. And you talk about how there are some moving parts. That's the only location with your moving parts, and your only location with preventative maintenance. So you
Mm-hmm.
think about it, even if you have a 1 megawatt block or a 7 megawatt block,
Mm-hmm.
you're only looking at one spot for any
Mm-hmm.
sort of moving parts compared
Mm-hmm.
to hundreds
And
in
the
the field.
and the power requirements of the compressor.
It's comparable to any AC powered tracker out there. We all have to move weighted glass, say 25 kV.
Mm-hmm. But do you have to have grid power, or can you be self-powered?
So to have the tracker function, we would like to have grid power. Typically, if you don't have grid power, you're not exporting. And the brilliance of our system is we don't have batteries anywhere. So if we do lose grid power, we can go into a safety stow mode and hold it at stow for weeks without power. And that's kind of the brilliance of air, is not requiring batteries to just hold air. There's tank holding air at gas stations all over the country. No issue.
Interesting. So you're using technology from the automotive industry. I get that, these polymers developed by DuPont. I mean, is that something that you have intellectual property on?
Yeah. I mean, the secret sauce is rounder actuator. That's the incredible widget that makes this all work. And then how we deploy it out in the field. So the brilliance outside of that is how familiar and simple the system is. Piles are piles are piles. Everybody knows what piles are. The only other piece of our structural system, so if we're counting, we're at 2. The third piece is the purlins, and those are just roll form purlins. And those are pretty well known in the industry. So there's a lot of property around the actuator and the system and how it connects, but structural wise, it's very simple. And all that goes together with just one nut, one bolt, one torque value.
And the purlin is a Z, is that
Yes, so
right?
it's a Z-purlin, which has a nice little lip in it where you can store your wires are running. Yep, correct. So you can see there's a nice little tray for wire management. Obviously, for this great image, we have our airlines running down the middle for everyone to see. Great little marketing piece. And these aren't uh, impactful to any sort of production in this scenario.
Yeah. Cool. And we're going to show an image now of some of the technology involved in array technologies and Next Tracker, the two largest tracker manufacturers in the United States, I think globally. Um, so what are we looking at here? And
Yeah, we're looking
it's
at
obviously more complicated at face value to do these mechanical trackers.
yeah, I mean, we're obviously looking at a lot of success and competency deployed into a product with these two brands, and some great products. What you're seeing is where we're attacking the next evolution in the tracker space. This is a commodity-based industry, and there's a lot of cost variation in this industry. These are two things that if we're going to continue to compete with fossil fuels, and it's not tracker versus tracker, it's solar versus fossil. To be clear, we need to keep attacking that commodity aspect and that variation in cost aspect. So you see really long torque tubes, and you see complicated gears, a lot of parts, a lot of bolts, a lot of part variation, a lot of friction points. Um, so by simplifying this system from these dozens of different types of parts for the structure, just three structural parts, you can make it be built much faster. You can make the cost variation between different types of projects much less. You neutralize your cost. And then also by removing your dependence on steel, you help to attack that commodity issue. I think we're all familiar with the fact steel prices are pretty wild right now. And if we can help the industry better armor themselves against the impact of steel prices, that's only good for solar versus traditional fossil generation plants.
Yeah. Yeah, I like your point that it really is not about pitting technology against technology. It's about pitting solar against fossils, and solar's winning. So,
Yeah.
um, now the wind is at our backs. It's simply a matter of can we deploy this stuff fast enough? And there's so much market expansion that it has created openings um, for up and comers like yourselves. Honestly, the the manufacturers are just going as fast as they can. And and you mentioned steel prices, as commodity prices fluctuate up and down, that does impact the industry. Um, so let's let's zoom out a little bit and talk more about the big picture. You know, solar is on a rocket ship ride here in the US, obviously globally as well. There's no need to tackle any other market than the United States, really. Um, but when you are out there talking to customers and EPCs, both that have experience with sunfolding now and those that don't, what are you hearing? What is it that EPCs are looking for?
Yeah, so the two big customer branches we think of are the developer and the EPC. Since we talked about EPC first, we'll dive into there. EPCs, I think, are, from what I'm hearing from them, are really craving a partner that can help them do what it takes because they're pitted up against building the most amount of solar they've ever built in their lives. They need to build it competently, and they need to build it on time. We're having this great explosion, but none of that changes the financial requirements of building things on time, the milestones, and repercussions for missing all those. So being able to meet those needs are massive. And on top of that, I think every EPC out there would agree they're all striving to figure out what that thing is that will normalize their cost across a variety of projects and sites, neutralize their costs. So if they could have a block that they know if they build it in Texas, if they build it in North Carolina, if they build it in Florida, will that block have the same electrical costs, the same tracker structure costs, the same module costs, the same construction costs? There's some things we can't account for: how heavy the snow is, how brutal the soil is it peat moss, is it caliche, is it great soil? But everything you can have in your control, what is that thing you can do to normalize and neutralize your costs? So these are things we're trying to tackle. And if you could solve these, they can build much faster quality product, simpler for their customer at the end of the day, which is the owner and developer.
For sure. Simpler is better. And let's talk about, logistics, kitting. What can an EPC expect from Sunfolding, hand holding around the golden row, that kind of stuff?
Yeah. I mean, we touched on it at the beginning, we're younger in the space compared to some other players in the market. All we have is our reputation, and we've spent a tremendous amount of time in our developmental years figuring out how we can have a polished deployment for a lot of the reasons we just discussed with the EPC world. Um, our leader of customer success, Ryan Kelly, on our team, who has a tremendous amount of experience from his time with Schletter, has helped put together some incredible deployments and track records of what you just said, incredible handholding around the golden row, on-time delivery, construction, success. So we're going to make sure the players are as confident as possible with building our product. And that's also working with our construction network, bringing all the people who are going to be building these solutions into our network and making sure they're as efficient as possible.
And so in terms of how the product is showing up on site and, being deployed, is that, well, what kind of feedback do you get from your EPC partners on that?
Yeah. So first of all, we get, whoa, where's all the torque tubes? This is the shipment must be missing. But I think there's quite a bit of astonishment at how few trucks per megawatt it takes to build out our product. I mean, we saw the images. We have a 30% less requirement on steel with our product. We look at less than a truck a megawatt when we get to scale on a project. So when you're in the full swing of deliveries, you're looking at less than one truck per megawatt for deliveries. That's because we have smaller piles. We have small purlins versus big torque tubes. And then we have our incredible actuator that folds flat for easy shipping.
Do you know what that statistic is for a torque tube based system in terms of
I,
trucks per megawatt?
I can't speak to a brand in particular, but I know it can range from 2 to 3.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it is starting to sink in for me. That 30% less steel is also a very significant number. So, in terms of cost competitiveness, what can EPCs expect?
There is a market price, I think, that they have in their mind, and we're usually right there or right below it. And that's just on upfront equipment. So boom, you've meet or achieved your goal of getting a tracker product. You have your construction cost. We're probably 30% more compact of a schedule, and therefore, the EPC, I don't want to speak for them. They know their construction costs a lot better, but that's definitely a significant reduction in construction costs.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is, we talked earlier about how small pixel sizes are really important. And you see a lot of trackers trying to achieve small pixels. That's why I think 2P came around, was to get shorter tables to handle terrain. With our product, you're going to see a 70% reduction or better in your civil costs to accommodate a tracker, because we have those short tables. You can follow the terrain a lot better. You don't have to cut and fill as much. So their day one expenses go down quite dramatically. And then there's all the later year ownership benefits, right? Low cost of O&M. If you use our pixel size to get a better distribution, a better GCR, you have more energy, a better ROI on your project. Several things like that.
Why don't you have any projects in the Midwest yet, Wes? Come on.
They're popping up. You're going to be seeing some in your backyard soon, hopefully. I mean, we're deployed in, I think, 14 or 15 states. We got large projects throughout all the major markets. We have some really exciting ones everywhere. And we got hundreds of megawatts going in as we speak. So you should see some Sunfolding projects in the neighborhood near you.
You do have some Midwest projects underway?
I mean, I think we all are aware of how hot of a market Iowa is becoming, Illinois is becoming, Minnesota. There's a group out there, US Solar, is doing some really cool stuff, and they're really paving the way for more community solar and small utility scale solar. There's a lot of projects going on in these markets. Wisconsin's having some projects go online. So
And I know you like to jump to that 7 megawatt block, but yeah, let's face it, the community solar market here is 3 megawatt. Um, Minnesota, it was 5, now it's 1 and 2. Are you truly competitive at that smaller scale?
yeah, absolutely. We just built a 5 megawatt project for one of our East Coast partners in Texas. And that's where we leverage our Sunfolding construction network and help them achieve the economies of scale a 100 megawatt project would bring them. And, we're leveraging our network to help neutralize the cost. I feel like I keep saying that word, but it's truly, how do you keep costs down and help deploy solar faster economically? So
Yeah.
we're extremely competitive at the smaller scale as well.
We also have a very harsh environment here. It's very hot and humid in the summer, very cold in the winter. What kind of feedback are you getting from deployments in harsh environments and the reliability of the compressor technology? There's another word for it though. It's not compressor.
I think progressive is a great one just because people are familiar with it. So, um, and it's a great question. So, two good comparison projects. We have a gorgeous but tough site in Colorado. I think I shared a video of it on LinkedIn if anybody wants to go check that out with the horrible music I put to it. But it's extremely high snow loads and it's extremely cold. It gets below zero all the time out here in Colorado. So, from a harsh climate in the terms of cold, it
Mhm.
performs beautifully out there. And then let's go to the other end of the spectrum. We have a beautiful 50 megawatt out in California, and it's dealing with 120 Fahrenheit, extremely hot conditions, not the most beautiful from like a corrosive level. And that's why we picked this polymer. That's why we are trying to reduce our dependency on steel. If this polymer is handling the corrosive environment of maritime and oil and natural gas, or it's in the CBJ boot or an air ride brake system of a truck traveling through Alaska delivering goods on the highway where lives are at stake, I think it handles the daily actuation in a solar plant pretty well.
Pneumatics was the word I was looking for.
Oh yeah, and for
Um,
the whole system. Yep, yep.
but yeah, point well taken. I mean, the automotive and trucking industries, obviously, they're exposed 24/7 to the environment across the spectrum. So that
Yeah, and
stuff
one
has
funny
to.
point is those trucks will see more actuation in one round of trucking, like one trip, than the
Mhm.
solar system will see in 30 years.
Wow. So what about rodents? That was our first concern when thinking about these compressed airlines running around a site. They're either above ground or below ground, and both places rodents will go. So what kind of feedback are you getting on that?
Yeah, I'd love to hear someone address this if they want to go into the comments or reach out to me. For some reason, rodents are extremely attracted to electronics. That project in Colorado I mentioned, it is a humongous hotbed for prairie dogs, which are protected in the county. So we couldn't grade the land. We couldn't remove the rodents. They had to just be a part of the system. And you'll see holes all over the place where they dug in right by the stub ups, where you see the airlines go in and the DC go in, and they're chewing up all the DC and leaving our stuff alone. It's absolutely amazing. There's got to be a scientific reason for why. I don't know if it's an electromagnetic field. They can sense the copper in the sheathing.
Yeah.
Not a clue, but
But that's still a
is it?
problem for not for Sunfolding, but for the asset owner. How are solar asset owners dealing with prairie dogs? I'm just curious. Is there a way to keep them from destroying the site?
It's a little bit of O&M cost. I came from the inverter world before here, and rodents were a nightmare for me. Snakes would get into our inverters. Gophers, squirrels would get into the machines. They love electronics. I think it's just an unfortunate known cost of deploying power plants in nature, where you want them to be a part of nature. You don't want to destroy nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm a big proponent for pollinator and wildlife friendly solar. and it
Yeah.
is at face value a good thing. So many environmental goods from that, but of course it comes at a cost to the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I uh, I wanted also to talk about your new CEO a little bit. You just what, nary 2 weeks ago, got a new CEO. What's the story there?
Yeah, very exciting news. Huge props to Jurgen and what he did to get us to this level and leading us through the setting your roots phase of the company. But we've transitioned to Glenn Davis, who is an industry veteran, to take us through this explosive phase of growth in the company. Glenn Davis was CEO over at Res Americas. He was group leader at AES. He has a tremendous amount of experience in project development, project finance, which is a huge part of where we are at in the space. You know, EPCs are starting to really love our product. We're starting to catch fire, and it's about getting all the financiers and developers in love with our product as well. Yeah, I'm very excited to have Glenn on board with his expertise.
Excellent. Well, what
Yeah.
else would you like our audience to know about Sunfolding, either the technology, the company, the landscape? Um, what is, what is, you know, you have a unique perspective, Wes, that it is seldom an EPC or developer can really get behind that curtain and see how manufacturers see the world. And you're skating to where the puck is going to be, truly. And, we are slow to change in the construction trades, but obviously you're onto something. And as it'll be the developers probably first, right, who say, okay, you're going to use this technology, and we go, okay, we will install that, right? uh, and but what else should our listeners know?
Yeah, you know, I truly like to believe that Sunfolding is a good-hearted, well-intent company at its nature and core. What we want to do is, and we talked about it earlier, Tim, is we don't want to be looked at as, hey, how does Sunfolding do versus Tracker A, B, or C? It's how can we collaborate together? Hopefully, we win at the end, but really, how do we collaborate together to make solar projects more scalable in a wildly more rapid fashion? How do we figure out how to neutralize your costs, build this quicker, and get this out fast? Because as we said in the beginning, we're only 2.7% of the energy produced on our grid today, and we need to get that much, much higher. How do we get it to 20%? How do we get it to 50? And then how do we take over? So I think people should understand we're excited to collaborate and innovate together because it's going to take the next level of innovation. We can't just sit in yesterday's technology hoping that a policy is going to drive this forward. We need to innovate.
It's innovate or die, I like to say.
Yeah. How do we eat our own lunch?
Can you say anything about the evolution of the product? Obviously, when we were talking in the pre-show, and I comment about how we saw your product in 2018, and you were like, "Wow, that was a totally different product." Um, how has it matured, and what is on the horizon for you?
Yeah. I mean, you got to see a real exciting evolution step there as we became focused on how do we get this delivered in a much cleaner, much more elegant fashion to the customer to reduce shipping costs and to increase install speed. I think that's still going to be in the core of every step of development we do is reduce our dependence on steel, increase construction speed, and increase liability. Maybe how do we become the most wind resilient tracker in industry history? Or how do we make a tracker that is impervious in terms of cost to snow load? These are holistic topics that are fascinating to try to solve, but it all goes back to that core idea of neutralizing your costs over a variation of site issues. A project in Arizona has no snow. A project in Maine, which is popping up with solar like crazy, has 90 PSF snow. So how do we get those costs to connect? I think it's an incredible problem to try to solve, and I think our product innovations in the future are going to show that.
Cool.
Yeah. I also have a tremendous amount of faith in Leila and the team and Matt Schneider and what they're going to do. So they surprise me every day.
Well, I want to make a few announcements and thank Wes Fuller. We here at the Solar Podcast are bringing you 2 interviews and 1 clean power hour a week. You can find all of our content at cesnrg.com/podcast. You see here David Spieldenner with First Solar talking about Plant Predict, a tool for energy modeling on utility scale projects. We talked with PJ Wilson, pretty much a legend in Midwest solar, now in Puerto Rico, building a 100% RPS there. We had Ryan Kiarsis with SolX Tracker by Axis, another tracker manufacturer. So bringing you tools and technology and thought leaders like Jigar Shah on the $1 trillion wealth creation opportunity. And then every Wednesday, John Weaver and I break down the latest news on solar storage and wind technologies globally. So check that out at cesnrg.com. I want to thank Wes Fuller, Vice President of Sales and Strategic Partnerships with Sunfolding, for coming on the show today, Wes. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Tim. It was a lot of fun. Looking forward to all the success you're having.
I want to remind our listeners, if you appreciate this content, please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. And reach out to me, TG Montague on Twitter or at CES Energy. You can find my contact info. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.